The VR Report podcast with David Jean O.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is David O from the VR Report, and I have a very special guest and a good friend, Cosmo Sharf. Cosmo, how are you, man?
Doing well. Excited to be here.
Fantastic. Hey, Cosmo, for the audience, you want to share your origin story, please?
Hey, it's great to be here. Yeah. So I am an entrepreneur. I'm a product designer. I've been working for the past 10 years to democratize 3D animation as well as immersive technologies such as VR and AR. I'm currently focused on Vision Hack, which is the first global VisionOS hackathon.
Cosmo, you're also an expert builder of XR communities. How did you get into XR?
I've always been obsessed with computers, technology, video games. That took me to discover YouTube back in 2007, in the early days of the viral video phenomenon. And I was excited to make viral videos myself, started making stop motion videos with my friends and short films. That took me to USC for college to study film production, whereupon I discovered virtual reality and entrepreneurship. And from there started VRLA and a couple other animation startups, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But now I am working on new immersive entertainment projects and product design and other tech-related endeavors.
That's interesting you went to USC. There's a lot of XR founders that came from that school, from Lucky Palmer, who created Oculus, to the founders of XR game hitmakers. Survios also came out of USC. Why do you think there's so much talent that came from USC?
Well, it's a good question. You bring up James and Nate, who I'm still friends with to this day, and
from Survios,
from Survios, and I've known you and them for 10 years. Back when I took that fateful trip to GDC 2014.
That's right.
And that's when I first met them and possibly you. I think
so. At the SVVR event, I believe.
Likely, yeah. That was when I just met a bunch of people in the VR space for the first time. That was a hugely impactful trip. And, to answer your question, I think USC attracts a lot of smart, talented people like myself. And they also have, of course, the film production program and the interactive media program. So I'd say more so the latter probably could explain part of why there's a lot of successful interactive. Of course, they also have many entrepreneurship classes and a program for that as well. So I don't know, what about USC specifically? I'm not I couldn't say for sure, but those would be, some places to take a guess there.
Yeah, I think with USC, you guys have that infamous lab, and also because the Marshall School of Business is there's an understanding of entrepreneurship and, of course, storytelling because it's based in LA. A lot of filmmakers coming out of USC, so I think there's a lot of crossover there.
Yeah,
and
really
also, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, that LA specifically is the intersection and capital for entertainment, whether it's movies, music, video games, VR. There's just a lot happening there.
Yeah, that's super cool. And, the time when VR was starting out, when we first met 10 years ago, you're starting to pioneer one of the biggest communities at XR, specifically around VR LA. It was a huge community, really focusing on the whole momentum of interactivity, spatial technologies, and creating communities is tough. Can you share with your personal experience, your blueprint of starting a community in a niche industry like XR?
Yeah, well, so the XR community today in 2024 is pretty different from 2014. And so I can share the story of how we started VRLA, and perhaps that will illuminate some answers to your question, because I'm not totally sure how much of that is applicable or transferable to the climate as it relates today, but I'm sure some of it will apply. So in 2014, VR was a dream. There was certainly some momentum, with the Oculus Rift having just launched its Kickstarter, and the DK1 was making its way into people's hands at around I want to say 2013 and 2014. So at that point, there was nothing that you could go out to Best Buy and just purchase a VR headset. That just wasn't a thing, right? It was essentially just this one startup that, was then acquired by Facebook at the time. And it was very nascent. It was not particularly advanced. I mean, it was certainly cool looking and it was mind blowing in many ways. And that was what drove the early interest and excitement. But, by today's standards in terms of like, screen quality or comfort or whatever, game library, content library, it was a fragment, a very small percentage of like what's capable. Early on, I wanted to meet other people that were excited about VR in the way that I was excited. And it was very strange and frustrating to me that none of my friends or really virtually anyone that I had a personal relationship with even knew about what VR was or nonetheless were excited about it. And so the meetup that I started was on meetup.com, and the goal simply was initially just to meet and chat with other people about VR because I didn't know anyone else. So I created this meetup group, and then I posted a link on the Oculus subreddit, and that week someone had made a comment replying to that post, who was John Root, who became my co-founder. But at the time it was just some Reddit person commenting like, oh, maybe we could host this here, where he was working at Digital Domain, which was one of the world's largest visual effects studios. And that was definitely like the first key moment of synchronicity in the story of my relationship with VR and just my career overall, because honestly, I had started this meetup group and I didn't have the first thought as to like how to actually execute it and how to do it. It just was like, I want to meet people was like the initial inspiration. And so this one person through the internet was like, maybe we could host at Digital Domain. And we ended up being able to do that. And John and I, along with several other key people, created VRLA. But it was that initial moment that gave legitimacy to the meetup in a way that I would never have been able to do on my own, because if I was doing it on my own, probably I would just do it like in a coffee shop or like, I don't know, at school somewhere, and it would have been fine. It just would have been very different. And so I think maybe the first key lesson there is don't do it alone. Find other people that share your interests. I mean, naturally, that's what building community is about. It's not like you're building a community of one, so maybe that's kind of obvious, but I would say maybe the core team, right? Like, don't try to literally like do it by yourself. And, similar lesson there is like, with the Vision Hack that I'm working on now, which is the Vision OS Hackathon, September 13th through 15th, coming up very soon. I have a couple key team members there that are working on it with me. So anyway, back to VRLA. Yeah, we really were riding the initial hype and just extreme passion and excitement that we had for this VR technology. In many ways, it was the word hype is like very key there, especially from like 2014 to 2016, because these things were not like publicly commercially available. I mean, you could buy them as dev kits, but that's a very different thing from making it available in like a commercial store. And in terms of our success, it was really a grassroots movement. Of course, we had sponsors, and that was key. Our first big supporter was AMD with like a significant sponsorship. So we were very lucky that companies, like large companies, wanted to support us and wanted us to succeed. And that was part of what made it so exciting those first couple of years. Was there was just this shared motivation and sense of like wanting us to be successful, and people rallied around us in that.
Building communities online is tough. What is your blueprint and advice for starting a community for a niche audience like XR?
Yeah, so we existed on many different platforms. Of course, we were on Meetup. We built up an email newsletter. We were on Twitter. We were on Facebook. We were on LinkedIn. So, of course, being on all the social platforms that you can handle, that your team can handle, we had a weekly newsletter that was all about VR news. And so we also collaborated with many other VR communities that were adjacent to us. So not in LA, but ones in San Francisco, in Seattle, in New York. So building that set of media partners that also wanted us to succeed, that we could do cross-promotion with, was part of what made us successful. And we built up a lot of goodwill within the community by always offering startup tables for free. So our community tables is what I think we called them. And essentially, we always remembered where we came from and like who we were supporting. So even though we were in the LA Convention Center and we had, some of the largest tech companies in the world demoing and having booths at the expo, we always made sure to have a certain portion of our expo floor available for free to indie startups. And that was always important to me. It was always important to John and other members of our core team. And I think through that, people just cared about wanting, there's this shared like mission around success for VR and also for VR LA. And that was
I think one thing that was really interesting about the VR LA community is that you would go to one of your events, which was huge. There would be thousands of people there. And I would be rubbing shoulders with executives from a lot of movie studios. I met someone who's now a friend of mine, Duncan Trussell, who also created Midnight Gospel on Netflix. He's a big evangelist for VR.
Yeah.
And it was very special. Your events were very special in the sense that you brought in people from the entertainment industry as well as XR. And I think that was really the crux of the movement of what you guys are building at VR LA.
Yeah, thank you. It will just, as I mentioned earlier about LA being the entertainment capital of the world, that was what was unique about our event compared to other VR events, and still to this day, bringing together both VR, video games, movies, storytellers, directors, etc. So, yeah, it was a special time, that period 2014 through 18, and a special place to have that, to be on the expo floor and to be there for those several events that we managed to pull off. It's a bit twinged with sadness that we're not still doing it, but regardless, I am very grateful for the time that we were able to produce those events and the times that we brought the community together. It was really amazing.
Yeah, bringing a community together with immersive storytellers is super important because the medium requires you to be immersed in the story when you're dealing with spatial technologies. You have a really extensive background with immersive storytelling with some of your previous startups. Mindshow, it was an example where you can actually have no development experience and tell really compelling stories with animated characters, as well as Visionary VR, which I remember when you and Johnny were first demoing that to me when I was at Leap Motion, and I was just really impressed with the polish and the quality of the tools to be able to bring VR experiences to life. Can you tell me about your experiences with startups after VR?
Yeah, thank you. So Visionary VR was the name for the company that became Mindshow. So we ultimately rebranded and changed the name of both the company and the product. But this was born out of the question around how to tell stories in VR. And Johnny Ross was really the initial person that was asking this question within our group. And Johnny and I had started VRLA together. And so we were chatting about storytelling in VR, and he was a commercial music video director. And we were looking at the time there was 360 video was one of the main answers to that question of how to tell stories in VR. And it was interesting. And the challenges with it was, it wasn't interactive. It was only from one fixed perspective. It was not nearly as immersive compared to all the game engine technologies that we were looking at. And so we had the idea of, okay, well, what if you could use a game engine to tell stories? And this was years before virtual production, with Unreal and that kind of thing. So this was like still very much ahead of its time in terms of like the prospect of using something like Unity more in like the entertainment and film perspective. Initially, we were looking at ways of guiding the viewer attention by having different zones of interactive and passive content within a VR space, right? So depending on where you're looking, that could trigger different areas of interaction. Use that as a mechanism for storytelling within VR. And that became a core foundation for a tool that would allow people to edit animated stories in virtual reality, kind of like a Final Cut Pro for VR. That was the initial prototype that we were probably demoing to you at the time. And it was interesting, but we were struggling to raise money off of that. And for me, it was cool, but it wasn't fully clicking yet in terms of my excitement for it. And same with the team. The HTC Vive had became announced in 2014, 2015 or so. And that really changed the game for us because that was the first VR system that had tracked controllers. I don't know if you remember, but like that was a big deal at the time because that was before the Oculus Touch controllers had been announced. And it was so cool, like the prospect of like having these really high fidelity tracked controllers. It unlocked huge potential because prior to that, it was literally just like you put this thing on your face and you kind of look around and like maybe you have like a, you know, Xbox controller, but we always knew that was just kind of not it, if that makes sense. And then if you remember, like the Oculus shipped with the simple input device, which was like the little like click controller, right? So
remote control.
yeah, it's like a little remote control.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny, like just funny to like reflect back to those early years prior to Oculus Touch and prior to HTC Vive controllers. Like there was this huge question around how to do hand-tracked controllers. Vive comes out, it's like, oh, lighthouses, lasers, so cool. Super precise. And so we were looking at that and we're like, oh, okay. Because, you know, we were doing this storytelling with game engines. And what if we could use that to tell stories? How would that work? What would that look like? This vision for an end-to-end content creation system using virtual reality, where from start to finish, you could choose your character, choose your environment, choose your props, record yourself as a character in first person, film it with a virtual camera, and then export that to then be edited later in Final Cut or whatever, and then share that online. And at the time, it was just an idea. And it was a very ambitious and exciting prospect to be able to do that. It was just like, wow, that was like, if that could exist, we got to do it. We just got to, like, we were so excited. And so that enthusiasm really carried us through making a prototype, ultimately raising money, building a team, then having to figure out how to actually make that for real, which was a whole other challenge. And yeah, we brought that to existence. And so it was an incredible, both with VRLA and with Mindshow, they were incredible exercises and learnings around how to make our dreams real. That's what entrepreneurship is to me. And it's an immense challenge and it's far from easy. And it's why a lot of people don't do it. And like I'm learning that and relearning that in every new project is what's so exciting.
That's a cool founder story. You created a community around a niche audience, you built up that audience, and then you actually built a product based on the learnings of what you learned from that community. What are some of the biggest challenges as an XR developer?
So a lot of the most successful VR games and companies are social multiplayer experiences. Think about VR Chat, Rec Room, Gorilla Tag. I'm sure we can name a couple others, but those are the first that come to mind that all involve talking or playing with other people. And so one of the big lessons applying that to Mindshow, we did have a social aspect to it that we were building out, but it was asynchronous, meaning we had this proto animated YouTube in VR thing where you could create content and then share that as shows, video, like interactive cartoons that could then be opened up and explored and experienced by other people around the world. And it was super cool, really ahead of its time, and I'm still super proud of what we were able to do there. But it was not synchronous. It was not like something where you could go in with someone else at the same time and talk and play together. So, if I could redo the product development, probably would start with synchronous multiplayer. And I think that's a big part of the glue of what makes a VR experience successful today. If you're going to go and raise a bunch of money, or the other route would be to, if you're a talented developer, do the solopreneur route and not hire tons of people, because VR development is super expensive. And unfortunately, the revenue that you need to generate is just not going to be what you need to sustain a team of like dozens of people. So, with Mindshow, we built an incredible product that people were happy with and that people loved and that we had traction in the market, but it was too early. It was a bit ahead of its time. Even though we had creators making videos with millions of views, we were entirely dependent upon VC funding to sustain our company's existence. And so we ultimately pivoted to more of a professional animation studio where we could, sell our content creation services, still leveraging the tool that we had built. But yeah, surviving as a company, as a startup, especially in VR, is tremendously difficult. And so that's why I say like the social multiplayer route, you can build community and build traction through that. and that can sustain you, as opposed to, I mean, for us, we were doing the like classic like Snapchat, Facebook model, which was kind of like the playbook that we had been operating under, which, I think was still the dominant at that time. This was like 2016 or 2017 era, where like that was still more kind of like a natural or expected thing for startups at the time. I think now, I'll just say the economy and the expectations around startups have shifted where they prioritize revenue much more heavily. And it's a lot harder to get away with like, a freemium product and this prospect of like, oh, hopefully someday we'll figure it out and we'll monetize later. Like, that's what Facebook did. That's what Snapchat did. And so you look at these super successful companies and hope and pray like that could be you. But the truth is that, at the end of the day, like if you don't have revenue, you're the whims of the market and the VC funding.
That makes total sense. And it's trying to keep that momentum, you have to show growth. And when you're trying to show growth with a new market, especially around new hardware, that's really challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. And I learned that again so from Mindshow, I worked on a new mobile 3D animation app, originally called Movieoke, which was all about doing karaoke with classic scenes from movies, TV shows, and memes on your phone using face capture and being able to record yourself as a character, looking at your phone and then exporting a video through that. And then from there, we added on AI using GPT-3. So we were really excited about that. This was like just as ChatGPT was coming online and making its way into the world. And that product became MovieBot, where we transform a text prompt into a fully animated with the characters and environment and voices of your choosing. And that again was another free product that was like, oh, maybe we'll hope to like monetize it at some point. And we did released a premium service like a couple weeks before we shut that down, unfortunately. But another great experience, but like similar of like, but being beholden to the whims of the market and the economy.
I like MovieBot in the sense that on my phone, I'm able to take Rick and Morty characters and with simple drag and drop features. I didn't try some of the prompt features that you had. I think that was after that I tried it. Mm-hmm. But the idea of incorporating generative AI from OpenAI to Llama, I think that's really the use case that people haven't experienced yet in XR, and that it's a sea change that's coming. We're used to voice assistants speaking to a speaker, or even having conversations with ChatGPT in the car during your commute. But it becomes a totally different experience when you're talking to a virtual character that now has intelligent and value things that you're communicating with. Yeah. What do you see as the future of that? Because you're way ahead of the time, but I think that's really the future that we haven't gotten into.
Thank you. Yeah. So Scott Brook, who I'm collaborating with now, he was one of the co-founders of Jaunt, which was one of the earliest leaders in 360 video and immersive storytelling. He had showed me 360 video for the first time, actually, in like 2014. He calls this animated intelligence. And I think it's a brilliant phrase because it kind of plays, of course, on the AI. acronym AI, artificial intelligence. Well, right. When you call it animated intelligence, it really starts to shift your thinking around what it is. And I was just reflecting on this yesterday of like the terms that we have for things in the world really shape how we think about them. Because when we say artificial intelligence, it puts it at a lower level than humans. And so it kind of has some affordances of like our relationship with it and how we treat it and how we talk to it. Whereas when we say animated intelligence, well, there's no like lower than or beneath than when compared to when we say artificial intelligence. I think that there's like this sense that it's separate from us. Animated intelligence is really what I've been working on for the last 10 years, starting with Mindshow and then moving into MovieBot and now some of the newer projects that I'm up to now. Maybe it's not super obvious right now for most people, but I think it represents a really profound shift in technology, in our relationship with computers, human-computer interaction. Of course, we've had Siri, we've had Alexa for quite a while. And they were initially fun and exciting and then kind of lost their interest and momentum, I would say. But now, of course, with generative AI, the prospect of having truly intelligent systems is already here and continuing to improve. And right now we interact with these systems through text chat windows for the most part. But you're right in that when we are able to embody those within digital human or character, they take on a new life that is more appropriate to be called animated intelligence, I would argue. And that, of course, can be displayed on our computer, that can be displayed on our phone, that can be displayed in AR, VR, XR, wherever. But they will become more so like beyond personal assistants, like more like our friends, because they will know so much about us. And they, beyond just like our interactions with the apps and content and games, like they will be our consorts in a way. Like if you think about right now our interaction with Siri, it's limited. I'm not sharing a whole lot with Siri about my personal life, but just reflecting on this right now, I put a lot of personal information into Claude, into Chat GPT. And so if you think about where that's going and how Apple will be able to capitalize on that, with this concept of personal AI. Right now, it's just this abstract colored rainbow thing, but I think naturally it will become embodied inside of a character of some kind at some point. Maybe not next year, maybe not in a couple years, but maybe 5, however many years. This is the interesting thing about Apple has not shown what Apple Intelligence will look like on Vision OS yet. We know that it's coming, and maybe the initial version will just be another, colorful Siri thing. But it's such an obvious thing to have Apple evolve that into some kind of character. And when it becomes a character, whether it's like photorealistic or cartoon-like, regardless of the style, our relationship to it will just change forever. And I'm excited about that. And it's also kind of like, I don't know about concerning, but just like we're entering a fundamentally new world once that happens.
Yeah, I think with this new shift of how we interact with AI, I think the earlier versions, pre-LLMs, large language models, and pre-generative AI, the AI was really focusing on device effectiveness. Siri, tell me what time it is. What's the weather? It's really a direct input of that device giving me that thing. Open up that app. Mm-hmm. And now what generative AI does is it opens things up where now, like you said, the AI knows a lot of information, personal information about you that can actually tailor content to you. Like, hey, Cosmo, I know it's your birthday, and I looked at all your photos, and I just put together a collage of all your best memories of all your different birthday parties now in full 3D. And guess what? You can jump into this XR experience that I developed for you for the Apple Vision Pro that now you can actually be immersed as a background viewer of these birthday parties. What do you think of that? And you're going to be like, hell yeah, bring me there. Let's go. And I think that's the next step that we haven't even been talking about yet.
Totally. No, that's you're spot on there. And we're in the beta period right now of
Yeah, Siri, just talking.
Apple Intelligence.
Right.
And the full version of it is not available yet, and it will be in the coming months. But it's also interesting and exciting to consider how that will be applied within a spatial context. We're just at the earliest phases of this. When you bring up this concept of like the AI creating worlds for you based on the photos, I think that's totally more than possible, right? Like if you think about what it takes to create Gaussian's Blatt today with just a video, right? So you think about like, if that's possible now, you can think perhaps at some point in the not too distant future, any photo or video that we take could be extrapolated into a fully realized 3D world that you could look around inside of. That's just one example. So I love that you bring that up.
We were talking about Apple, what Vision Pro is doing, and that's really your main focus now with Vision Hack. This is a new community you started around hackers that are building for Apple Vision Pro. Tell me about Vision Hack and what you've learned about building a community with Apple Vision Pro developers that's different from Quest or traditional VR developers of yesterday.
Sure. Yeah. So Vision Hack is the first global Vision OS hackathon that's starting September 13th through 15th. So it's coming up in less than 2 weeks. So I'm super excited
Gotta get your
about it.
ticket.
Yeah, so first of all, if you want to learn more, you can go to visionoshackathon.com. You can sign up there. And the intention here is to catalyze and grow the community of Vision Pro developers. Right now, it's very reminiscent of the early days of the Quest and VR back in like 2014, 15, where there's some initial interest and enthusiasm and excitement, but somewhat of like a lack of clarity around where to go and like what to do with this amazing technology. Apple, has built this incredible device, both in terms of hardware and software, and just kind of dropped it into our hands. And like, it's like, okay, here you go. Like, now what? So there's this question of now what? And that's partially what Vision Hack is looking to solve, just gathering the community and offering opportunity to gain experience building for this platform. Of course, connect with fellow developers. And, there's a lot of just immense potential and opportunity for Vision Pro. I'm super bullish on it. I know that there's a lot of skepticism around it naturally, which it honestly makes a lot of sense. And, some of the criticisms I do agree with, and I have my own complaints and criticisms about it as well. But yeah, so what we're doing with this hackathon is, of course, beyond just making the projects and having an opportunity to connect with other people, there will be workshops, and so you'll be able to learn from developers that have made successful apps and products for this platform. And another big inspiration for it, something that we're super excited to, is spatial personas. This is something that is unique to the platform. I know, of course, Quest has previewed the codec avatars, but that's not available yet. Maybe it will be sometime soon, who knows? But to me, spatial personas represent a complete revolution in telecommunication technology. It's not obvious because not a whole lot of people have tried it or are even aware of it. A lot of even developers and just people that own Vision Pro are not even aware of it. But what's remarkable to me is that we have effectively access to like Star Wars or Star Trek hologram communication. Today, right now, you can go and project your friend into your bedroom or living room and feel like you have a shared sense of spatial presence with them, and then watch movies or play games or do all kinds of things. And it doesn't work perfectly. Sometimes there's glitches, but it's rapidly improving. Even from Vision OS 1 to 2, there's some, subtle but nice tweaks there. And the point is that we saw that and we're like, oh, what if we do that? What if we could leverage that with a hackathon? So that's, one of the dimensions to this that I'm interested in and excited to see what will come of it, because it's so new. We don't really know totally how to best take advantage of it yet. There's not a ton of apps that are SharePlay enabled, but we're looking to, because it's a global hackathon, people from around the world will be able to talk to each other as if they were there together. I've experienced this a couple times where I've had spatial, what we call space times, so spatial FaceTimes with someone that was like in, I want to say New Zealand, and he's just like here in my room. And it's like, it just works so well that like you forget what the reality of the situation is, where like two people are in countries separated by thousands of miles and the distance is collapsed. And to me, of all the spectrum of cool things about Vision Pro, like that's probably the singular thing that like I would point out that it is uniquely great at, and not a whole lot of people are talking about. So that's one of the things that we're looking to draw attention to.
What you just talked about, the codec avatars that Meta had announced, they should, Mark had showed off these really realistic avatars that people can have conversations with. But at the same time, how far away is that? And you brought up a good point, with Apple's personas, the avatars that you actually create with your Apple Vision Pro, you basically scan your face with the eye tracking in the Vision Pro that has your eye movements, and it has a very uncanny resemblance to you photorealistically. What you're saying is that, hey, wow, this is really new. This is new and different, that these personas who are now embodiments of you as an identity. Now in the Apple Vision Pro, it kind of looks like you, it talks like you.
Yeah.
But now, what if AI is attached to that? What does that look like? Is it a
Totally.
mini-me that plans your whole week for you? Developers can then figure out all the different use cases that are around that. Like, are you saying that that's something that's really important to you right now?
Well, it's an interesting concept that I started to think about a couple of months back as well. I mean, this doesn't exist yet, but Apple has all the pieces to do something really pretty wild. I don't know if they're going to do this. I don't have any insight into this, but just take this as a concept right now. But here are the pieces. You have Apple Intelligence and the large language models, right, that more advanced Siri. And then you have photorealistic avatars. Right now, of course, it's just your own face, your own persona that you scan with the cameras of the device. So you could imagine AI-driven version of a persona, and maybe that would be like a new version of Siri. That would be super cool. Also, what I desire is like the ability to send messages like asynchronously, right? So, earlier we were talking about with Mindshow the difference between synchronous and asynchronous multiplayer and conversations. Right now, makes sense. It's great. Like they've opted for a spatial FaceTime, and that's wonderful. What I want is the ability to record and send a message to, for example, like, hey, how's it going? And then send that to you. And then you could watch that and open that up as like a 3D hologram. To me, that's like an inevitable thing. I don't know when they will do that, but like that would just be super awesome.
Yeah, it makes me reflect on Ray Kurzweil, I guess the godfather of singularity, created the scanner and tons of other technology breakthroughs. But Ray Kurzweil is really infamous of having this documentary and all these teachings and writings about the singularity, when the human will interact or emerge with technology. And he has a dream. I don't know if you saw the documentary, but he lost his father. And he always remembered his youth where he had these great memories with his dad. And he said, wow, after his dad's passing, I would love to be able to dedicate my life to meet him someday. And I remember watching that documentary like, wow, that's so out there, man. We're so far away. But everything that we're just talking about, personas, attaching them to Gen LLMs.
Yeah, it's a funny idea because, it's spot on. Like, I think that we are definitely heading in that direction of being able to resurrect the dead digitally. But at the same time, we don't need technology for that. And so that's, I think, not a misstep, but like just maybe a misunderstanding of reality or spirituality that like, he's leading the charge on the transhumanist movement that I used to be super excited by. And, I read his book, How to Create a Mind. And, back in, especially when I first started getting into VR, the prospect of the singularity and transhumanism and like going into the Matrix was super exciting to me. And that was part of what drove my enthusiasm. And then over the past 10 years, through a variety of experiences, I'd say some psychedelics, some just more, grounded here, just learning about myself and watching videos and books. Yeah, I've come to just a much broader understanding of reality that incorporates spirituality beyond technology. And I don't think we need we headsets to contact other people, that are not living. So it's certainly a cool idea, but yeah, I think we tend to like create technology that reflects capacities that are already natural to us biologically.
Agreed. I think, the idea of having memories of loved ones that you don't necessarily have to have them embodied in digital form, but that's going to happen. That, all the information that we're feeding the machine, we technically can live forever, at least virtually. And I think the concept can go astray. We all seen that Black Mirror episode and read all the books, but at the same time, I think that this is something that we're going to have to come across with and have to actually face as a culture, as a society. What does this mean?
Yeah, it's kind of bizarre and like almost like amusing, this prospect of wanting to live forever digitally when we already live forever spiritually. Like death is an illusion. We cannot die. Like we've always existed. We've always been here. This is a temporary form of our human existence in this human lifetime right now here. But when we die, we will, I don't know where we will go precisely. I can't say for sure, but like we will have many more lifetimes to experience.
Getting off the subject of transcendentalism, tell me about working with the Apple Vision Pro community and the differences between other communities in the past and XR.
So what's unique about Vision OS is its relationship with iOS and Swift and Xcode. So the great benefit of the Apple ecosystem is that developers can benefit from all the innovation and history of the past several decades with mobile iOS. Quest and the Meta platform doesn't have that same advantage. And so what we see is, of course, a lot more games built on Unity with Meta Quest And of course, you can use Unity to build games for Vision OS, but there's a lot more mobile developers on the Vision OS platform right now. And so that's a great advantage that Apple has. At the same time, it's not so much, or I'll say at the same time, there's a challenge where majority of Vision OS experiences are 2.5D, meaning like flat planes projected into your world as if they're floating, in your room somewhere. And that's cool. It's interesting. Certainly makes for a great released video, but practically it's not as good of an experience compared to using our phones and our computers. And so the challenge over the next several years is leaning into what makes the spatial computer a spatial computer. How can we take advantage of the unique capabilities in terms of immersion and mixed reality that the Vision Pro is uniquely capable of? And that's why I love, the example of spatial personas. That's something you simply cannot do on your phone or your computer. And so as it compares to other XR and VR communities and platforms, it's just way more new, right? The device hasn't been out for even a year yet, and maybe Vision OS has been out for a year or so for developers to experiment with, but the hardware itself is first gen. And so it's quite polished. At the same time, it has, its own challenges with weight and comfort compared to the Quest. I think doing things is just more challenging on Vision OS compared to Quest. You can still use Unity for both, but Unity on Vision OS, because it's not native, they're always a little bit behind the native innovations. And so there's always going to be some limitation there. So I think that, for Apple to be really successful with Vision Pro, building up reality, like apps like Reality Composer, almost as like a Unity competitor, I don't know if they're necessarily view it that way, but I could see that becoming integral to their strategy, because right now they're leaning quite heavily on Unity for more native 3D experiences, and that's the native 3D stuff is what makes the platform so incredible, right? Getting to interact and observe a 3D model or play some kind of game. That's what's so magical, right? Like, I'm not putting on my Vision Pro honestly to look at a window, and I don't have anything wrong with windows or screens. That's a pretty native component to the platform overall. But the truth is that I can get work done way more efficiently on my computer or my phone compared to Vision Pro because of the mouse and keyboard. And I get that I can connect that to my headset as well, but it's just not as practical today. Now, I think that could change over the next several iterations, and I think it needs to get there in order for it to be successful, to be honest, but it's just not quite there yet.
Yeah, I think you brought up a good point regarding the main difference between Apple Vision Pro developers versus previous development is the sense that Swift and iOS has matured, and for them to add a spatial component, all the building blocks for a developer on iOS are already there. So to onboard and to build a spatial app, to your reference, building a 2.5D app is not that difficult, considering that you're already an expert in the development in the iOS ecosystem. And so it's very easy for Apple Vision Pro developers, if you're thinking about spatial, to jump in because the tools are already there. But it's now the aspect of understanding what this means in a full immersive 3D environment.
Yeah, precisely. And the reference that I like to bring up sometimes is when Steve Jobs was introducing the iPad. In that keynote, he was making the case for a third genre, a third category of devices. He's like, okay, the mobile is really good at mobile stuff. The desktop and laptops are really good at those things. So why do we need to create a tablet? Well, it's going to have the best of this and it's going to have the best of that. And it's all about trade-offs. And so he was making the case, okay, this is why we need the tablet. And whether that was successful or not is another conversation. I think yes, to a certain extent. So how can we make the case for the Vision Pro? And I can make the case for it. There's a couple things that it's uniquely great at. Watching movies. And, having basically a giant IMAX screen. I was just watching Furiosa last night. Phenomenal. Oh my God. Incredible experience. The comfort is another challenge there, but that's kind of separate. Then spatial personas, playing spatial games, right? Those are some things that it's uniquely great at But where it falls down is, for me, this is just my own experience. Other people might have solved this in other ways, but like productivity, like utility, like when it comes to like getting work done, I get that I can stream my Mac monitor into it, which is awesome. I happen to not really use that too much, to be honest, because it's just like, why do I need to wear something on my face that's like not the most comfortable thing in the world? The point there is like, when the weight is truly negligible, and we can like wear it like all day without thinking twice about it. That's when the trade-offs are going to be worth it to like get work done. But right now, when I'm looking at my iMac and I'm just with my mouse and keyboard shortcuts, and like I'm super fast at text editing and just using all kinds of productivity apps and little shortcuts and things like that. That just doesn't exist on Vision Pro. Now I think we'll get there at some point. How long it will take, I have no idea, but when the Vision Pro can be as fast or faster than my Mac at certain things, like, whoa, that's going to be a big deal.
And I think this is a great segue regarding Vision Hack. This new hackathon, it's a global hackathon. Anyone can participate. It's not a physical location. That's what developers can be doing at your event. They can actually be exploring these ideas. Can you tell developers what they can be expecting at Vision Hack at the event that's coming up in 2 weeks?
Sure. Yeah, of course. First of all, again, if you're curious, go to visionoshackathon.com. You can learn about everything I'm going to share. It's about 2 days worth of time. So Friday through Sundays, not quite 48, but roughly 48 hours. And there's 4 categories: games and entertainment, productivity and utility, well-being and lifestyle, and then XR Demo Party, which is more of like an audio-visual thing sponsored by XRVC, which is our title sponsor. And each category will have 3 winners. So we're maximizing the number of winners, starting at 3,000, then 1,500, and then 500 for each place or each prize within each category. And so the main thing, of course, that we'll be doing together is, it's an opportunity for a short, focused time to create a project. And of course, it's not a ton of time, but the idea there is, of course, like with any hackathon, it's really an excuse and motivation to just make something cool quickly. And through that, it's a learning process. It's a collaborative learning process where hopefully you'll be working with some new people, maybe some people that you're already coming in with. There will also be, on Saturday, 5 different workshops from different developers that have made successful apps on Vision OS. And yeah, we'll have more presentations, we'll have prizes, we'll have just, a fun time to get to know other folks in the community and hopefully make some really fun, innovative things together.
Everyone should check it out. If you're a developer interested in Apple Vision Pro, you're an Apple Vision Pro developer, this is the must event that you have to check out. Cosmo, where can people find you?
Well, I'm pretty active on X, so you can just search my name, Cosmo Scharf, COSMO SCHARF. I also have a newsletter called Magic Beans, where I share weekly updates about Vision Pro, XR, AI. You can check that out at magicbeansnewsletter.com.
Cosmo, thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, this has been fun.
Cool.